What's best to pair with your next fancy dinner? Raise the stakes with these whiskeys. The Henry McKenna Single Barrel 10-Year Bottled in Bond is one of Heaven Hill Distillery's longest-aged selections, spending an entire decade in the barrel prior to being unleashed in a glass. It carries warm notes of vanilla, oak, and caramel, and bears a strong, woodsy finish that takes its sweet time on the tongue. Case in point, it's going to go exceptionally well with a dry-aged beef on your plate. Bottled in Bond refers to the Bottled in Bond Act of 1897, which enforced specialized production methods to block imitations and ensure the spirit stayed true to its roots. By all counts, Henry McKenna deserves its status among the best of the best. Bourbon Banter recommends sipping this one with a New York strip, which has a rich flavor and rugged bite that would seamlessly align with a simple shot. Plus, its 100 proof label makes it a great pick for sipping neat or mixing into cocktails, since the spirit won't dissipate under the pressure of other liquids. Balance is arguably the most important factor when pairing bourbons with steak. You want something bold so that it's memorable, but not to the point of overpowering the meat on your plate. If this is your predicament, you might want to take a gander at the Kentucky Straight Bourbon from Angel's Envy. These self-proclaimed perfectionists produce a bourbon that's less spirit and more golden nectar, and it's won many awards over the years. It's crafted in batches of 8 to 12 barrels at a time and undergoes an extensive fermentation process, starting in white oak barrels, then finishing in Portuguese port casks made of French oak, according to the company. The result of its long hibernation is a smooth mouthfeel, with a consistency not unlike a rich Merlot. According to the Whiskey Wash, these similarities to wine make it a great candidate for charbroiled steaks, particularly with its contrasting sweet flavor profile of vanilla and maple syrup and the complexity of toast and bitter chocolate. For a complex bourbon that should please most palates, you'll want to give this one a pour. Maker's Mark is a pleasant spirit brimming with a scent of caramel and wheat, followed by comforting notes of sweet vanilla and vibrant fruit. This brand uses soft red winter wheat, which bears a gentler hand in the mash bill as opposed to rye, according to the company. Other features include pure Kentucky limestone water and double-barrel distillation for a smooth consistency, while a blast of fire to the barrels lends its trademark smokiness. Despite some of its harsher elements, Maker's Mark rounds itself out with a pleasurable burn, described by the whiskey shelf as, quote, mellow and smooth. An easy-to-drink spirit is the way to go with a steak dinner, especially where a peaceful ambiance is concerned. If wine and dines are anywhere in your future, a bottle of Maker's Mark will certainly fit the bill. When the opportunity arises to dig into a ribeye steak, spring for a bourbon that matches its rich complexity. Seasoned professionals such as Four Roses understand the high stakes of distilled spirits, having honed its craft for more than a century in Lawrenceburg, Kentucky. The single-barrel bourbon shows perfect pairing potential, made from an exclusive blend of corn, rye, and malted barley that poses a strong, fruit-forward taste on the palate. Additionally, Four Roses boasts a vigorous profile because of its high rye content, but the spiciness plays well with gentler notes such as pear and maple syrup. It's aged on the longer side at 7 to 9 years, making it special enough for a romantic steak dinner or any occasion where you feel like pampering yourself. Another plus is that it's not going to break the bank and is offered at a reasonable enough price to justify having it in your collection. As Whiskey Advocate reveals, potent whiskeys like these are ideal with artisanal steaks in all their meaty, juicy glory. For a bourbon that won't strip your throat raw, and that tastes great with a perfectly cooked steak, look to those made with wheat. Offerings such as Larceny's small batch Kentucky Straight Bourbon go well with marbled steaks, and that's because the fat swirled throughout intensifies the richness found in the whiskey. According to Whiskey Advocate, the brand's name pays tribute to John Fitzgerald, a treasury bond agent whose exploits stealing barrels of booze out of the rickhouses he was assigned to cover established him as a bourbon legend. Its mash bill leans heavily on wheat instead of rye, fermenting anywhere between 6 to 12 years in open-air surroundings. Vine Pear notes its mouthfeel is caramelized and full-bodied, as many wheated bourbons tend to be, with slight hints of bread and butterscotch taking it all home. What's more, Larceny doesn't just craft any old wheated bourbon. Each bottle is infused with 25% more wheat than other bourbons of its kind on the market, so this is a good choice for going beyond the typical rye-based varieties. Between its coppery hue and yeasty sweetness, you'll find savoring anything else with your filet mignon just plain wrong. Another solid option for sipping with your steak is Woodford Reserve's Straight Bourbon. Thanks to its long aging process and mineral-rich density, it blooms on the tongue with more than 200 different notes, ranging from leathery tobacco and autumnal spices to chocolate and dried fruits. As if that wasn't impressive enough, the distillery where the magic happens is a historic landmark in Kentucky, according to its website. For a rye-based bourbon such as Woodfire Reserve, opt for tender steaks that don't feature much fat. Jake Scott Wines and Spirits, for example, points to cuts such as the sirloin or porterhouse, whose leaner profiles flatten the bourbon's spicy nature. And, as Master of Malt suggests, going the cocktail route with an old-fashioned would help calm the bitterness down if drinking it neat isn't your bag. If an upscale meat-eating experience is on the books, this is a bottle you'll want to have on the shelf regularly. Between the beef and the bourbon in front of you, it'll truly be a buffet for the senses. There's great debate over how bourbon should be enjoyed with steak. Do you drink it neat with no distractions, diluted with a scoop of ice, or mixed into a cocktail? Thankfully, Elijah Craig's small batch bourbon is versatile enough to satisfy all steak lovers' preferences, on top of being easy to find. It's a smokier rendition of the spirit due to the distillers charring the oak barrels during the aging process, which showcases the toasty flavors present upon first taste. Highly rated and reviewed, there's no doubt this bourbon would be a hit in any of the forms mentioned above with sturdier steaks. Boston Common echoes the suggestion of going big on flavor both in bourbon and beef. It's a little fiery, a little spicy, and bold enough to meet a fleshy hunk of beef on its own level. Gentle isn't a word we typically use to describe bourbon or steak, but we're always willing to make exceptions. Weller's Special Reserve, a selection produced by the craftspeople at Buffalo Trace Distillery, is a wheated bourbon, meaning that wheat is the prominent grain in the spirit's mash bill. As Breaking Bourbon elaborates, the name references William LaRue Weller, the individual thought to have come up with the idea of utilizing wheat in lieu of rye, and perhaps the reason we're writing this list in the first place. Far from the acidic substance flowing out of most dive bars, this bourbon bears a delicate touch that's easy to drink. Some of the tasting notes include butterscotch, honey, vanilla, and honeysuckle, as well as oak for some rustic flair. We'd argue it's a bourbon for those who don't drink bourbon, which is why pairing it with grilled steaks would be best. A match made in flame-broiled heaven, if there ever was one. If you are planning a decadent steak meal with all the fixings, marinades, sauces, the works, why not invest in a quality bourbon while you're at it? Eagle Rare 10-year-old is a crowd pleaser in just about every way, from its indulgent finish to its seductive blend of toffee, orange peel, and rugged leather. It's also a collector's item for bourbon enthusiasts. Gear Patrol notes its impressive decade-long fermentation process and limited supply make it a highly coveted bottle for booze collectors. Liquor stores can't seem to keep it on the shelves, or out of the hands of price-gouging resellers for that matter, according to Malt Review. Hype aside, there's a lot to love about Eagle Rare. It's bold and brash, like a bourbon should be, while remaining approachable to the newly initiated. The whiskey shelf recommends it for first-timers wanting to get their toes wet, just as much for booze experts who prize good taste. Thanks to its citrusy, toasty mouthfeel, you won't find a better bourbon to have by your side, especially where steak is concerned. We know Kentucky is the birthplace of bourbon, so it's no surprise the year it entered the Union has gained a mystique, as seen in 1792 bourbon. This high rye number is made in Bardstown, Kentucky at the Barton 1792 distillery, remaining the oldest facility of its kind in town. It has all the elements that make a rye bourbon distinct, including a rich coppery hue and warmth-inducing tones of vanilla and wood. Although 1792's mash bill isn't publicly disclosed, the whiskey wash confirms rye can compose anywhere between 20 to 35% of a high rye bourbon's recipe. Regarding 1792's small batch bourbon, this is probably the case. The whiskey advocate suggests pairing this type of bourbon with an aged steak to bring all the flavor's strengths to the forefront. It's unapologetically potent, so venturing on the side of caution is highly recommended when treading this particular bourbon trail. Swallow it neat or splash with a little water to achieve your ideal heat. New Riff Kentucky Straight Bourbon differs from many of the selections we've highlighted here. It's not only bottled in bond for authenticity, but it's non-chill filtered, which means the excess particles that are accumulated during aging are not strained from the final product. That helps it achieve a nice earthy funk, in addition to its relatively brief 4-year fermentation period. As Bourbon Banter details in a review, the flavor profile is robust, brimming with notes of cinnamon, butterscotch, brown sugar, and dark fruits. Yet the mouthfeel is quite abrasive and leaves a lasting finish on the tongue, which can be good or bad depending on your preference. That's why pairing it with a dry-aged steak is your best bet, as the savory taste of the meat would gel beautifully with the bourbon's astringency. Considering the company also makes steak seasoning, it's reasonable to suggest a shot of New Riff to follow. For a traditional pairing like bourbon and steak, sticking to the classics will never let you down. Wild Turkey's 101 bourbon seems like an obvious choice, only because it's so prominent in the liquor arena. It's the brand's top-selling selection, and boasts a rich rye base and signature copper shade developed through extensive barrel aging, about 6 to 8 years according to Wild Turkey. Its 101 proof signals strength, but its flavor profile is surprisingly low-key. There's an essence of caramel, orange peel, vanilla, and cinnamon. Basically, all of your favorite baking spices mingled with sturdy notes of oak and wood. And no, Matthew McConaughey does not come with your purchase of 101. Clearly, Wild Turkey goes great with steak. But how about putting it in a steak sauce? The fact that there are endless recipes for steak sauces and marinades made with Wild Turkey's bourbon shows that its popularity with a classic cutlet goes beyond any doubt.
Bourbon. You drink it. I've had enough stimulation for one day.